NBC News can now project that Donald Trump has won the state of Wisconsin, which means he is the winner of this race and will return to the White House as this country's 47th president.
I'm sorry. No! Why?
A second.
Our boy Donald J. Trump did it, ladies and gentlemen. He won a landslide victory. I'm talking about a statement, decimating win over Kamala Harris. I don't want to say I called it, but I did call it. I just knew that there was no way this woman had any chance of winning, and I'm glad that the results of the election showed that it was not even close. And I don't know about you, but I have been enjoying over the last 2 days the Democrats losing their minds. But they've also, in the same breath, had to start to look themselves in the mirror and think, why was it that we lost so bad in such humiliating fashion, getting swept in the Electoral College, getting swept in the popular vote, losing the House, losing the Senate? I mean, this was a statement from the American people that they are not down with the policies of the Democratic Party. And as much as they want to whine and complain about it, they are forced to look in the mirror and figure out why that is. That Donald Trump's win was quite a statement. Watch.
Where should Democrats go from here? I'd suggest France for a couple of weeks and think it over. 32% of Americans, only 32% of Americans who voted identified themselves as Democrats. Donald Trump won, if I'm not mistaken, I think I saw this in Mike Allen's newsletter, 1 of 3 votes from people of color. And Donald Trump has put together a working class coalition across racial lines that nobody has done in this country in over 50 years.
There it is. Finally, they admit it. Finally, they tell the truth, open their eyes, and look at the real world for just a second. He built a working class coalition across racial lines. No, he wasn't racist. No, people didn't think that. You see how it's always these two groups of people who are trying to tell people of color what they should be offended about, how they ought to think, and that somebody else is racist and we can't think for ourselves and in our own best interests. It's women and it's white liberals. The two most offended groups have this response to everything that's said that's offended. They get offended, they live and die by being offended. So of course, they're trying to project their sensitivity on everybody else and say, hey, you should be offended because I'm offended. But I'm glad they are forced to admit that it did not work. Everybody across racial lines like Trump. So I don't want to hear any more comments about how he's racist. Clearly, people don't think that. You can't just say that he's racist. That's an opinion. The polls show otherwise. Minority people have told you through their vote that he's not racist. And the fact that he said it wasn't able to happen like that in 50 years, that says it all. That says it all. If you can't accept the fact that that aura and that support is real, you're lost. I don't know what else to say. And my final thing is, you see how out of touch these people are? What was the first thing he said? Where Democrats should go from here? Well, maybe a couple of weeks in France to think about it. See, these are the elitist people who think that they're better than us, they're more virtuous than us, they're smarter than us, and they think that they ought to be able to tell us how we should feel because they're not them. These people talk about, well, let's go to France after a couple of weeks and moreover the loss. That's the whole reason you guys lost, is because working class, middle class Americans who can't think that way, who have to deal with reality, we're hurting. Yeah, from your ivory tower, everything is fine. If things go bad, just go to France. That's why you guys lost the election, because you're out of touch. And he actually goes on to admit that they're out of touch, which is even crazier. So he continues to talk about how the Democrats have more than a policy problem. They have a cultural problem. Watch.
You don't have to be a Republican, though I was a Republican. You don't have to be a conservative, though I was a conservative, to understand that seeing ad after ad after ad in NFL football games saying that taxpayers were going to be funding transgender surgeries for inmates, it's not something that's going to play well in Wisconsin, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania. They're afraid to offend, always afraid to offend, always afraid to offend on border security, always afraid to offend on so many other issues. They're at 32%, and they have lost working class America. The question is, how long until they understand that this isn't just about tax cuts. This isn't just about economics. This is about cultural markers that matter greatly in these people's lives.
Boom, boom. He hit it right on the head. The Democrats lack a cultural understanding for America. And that's not surprising, seeing how a lot of the far left, their rhetoric is all about why they hate America, why the institutions are racist and misogynistic and need to be burned to the ground. Of course, they don't have an understanding of American culture. Americans are ambitious, strong, tough, thick-skinned, resilient, brave people. That is our DNA. And when you play to that, that's going to attract a lot of people. People are going to get behind that message. But when you do exactly what he just said, you're scared to offend because your base is so offended by everything. You appeal to the weakest, softest, backbone-lacking people. And that's how you tailor your message to everybody. Yes, working class people in Pennsylvania aren't going to like that or respond to that. Real life people don't believe that inmates should get taxpayer-funded transition surgery. Their platform is out of touch and their message falls on deaf ears. In fact, it offends the average working class American. And the votes showed that. And I'm really happy that the election went this way. Again, a landslide statement victory tells the Democrats that they have to adjust. And I think personally that that's very good for the unity of the country because they're the ones being so divisive, calling people Nazis and fascists and going so crazy on their ideals and policies that now they're forced to come back to the middle, which is good for American discourse and unity because now things aren't going to be dragged so far apart. And the same probably could have been said if the Democrats would have won in a landslide victory. If you see that the pulse of the nation is more right-leaning or it's more left-leaning, then if the other party wants any chance of success, they have to move in that direction. They don't have to abandon their ideals, but they certainly have to be more moderate in terms of what they're trying to do and propose. And so if the Democrats ever want a chance to win again, they're going to have to come more towards the center, be more about common sense, less about divisive, radical left issues. And overall, that's going to be really good for the country. But unfortunately, there's still a large majority of Democrats who are chalking this loss up to racism and misogyny and are still doubling down on the Trump is Hitler, Trump is a fascist rhetoric. Watch Rachel Maddow from MSNBC talk about what she's scared of and what's going to come next.
And the strategic first moves come into focus quickly when you think about what other countries have shown us about how hard it is to regain democratic ground once an authoritarian leader has taken that ground. And the work has to be done now. The work that has to be done now, it has to happen in sort of every aspect, every corner of our society. The U.S. military needs to give the American people binding assurances that they will not deploy U.S. military force against the civilian population in this country. They can give those assurances, and now they should. The free press needs to give the people of this country assurances that they will not become state TV, that they will stand and fight together. They will put aside rivalries and petty professional differences. They will stand and fight together as the free press, as the fourth estate, as an institution that is a pillar of our democracy, as these guys on the other side inevitably start picking off individual journalists, individual publishers, individual news organizations to try ultimately to turn us all into some American accented version of RT.
I don't get these people. Trump was democratically elected. More votes than Kamala, more electoral votes than Kamala. The Senate went red. The House is going to stay red. This was all done through the democratic process. Yet you're doubling down on this authoritarian fascism rhetoric. The American people voted. How are the results from a democratic process indicative of fascism? Just make it make sense. You lost. You didn't get your way, and you're throwing a tantrum, and you somehow are contradicting yourself by talking about fascism as the result of a democratic election. Make it make sense. And to her two statements at the end. Number one, the military doesn't owe you any assurances. Okay, Rachel Maddow, you can go to sleep tossing and turning and worried about Trump and Project 2025 all you want. The military does not need to come out and give you assurances that they're not going to attack U.S. citizens, because they never were and they won't anyway. And number two, the free press isn't going to turn into a state media outlet. Most of the legacy media, 90% of it, is Democrat leaning. And I'm pretty sure you guys are going to spend the next 4 years every day critiquing Trump and still calling him a threat to democracy, a fascist, whatever you're going to do. So he doesn't need to worry, and you don't need to worry about him getting 100% favorable coverage, because you guys are going to make sure that that doesn't happen. I mean, just the fear in these people that they're trying to instill in their audience is just dishonest, and it's not helpful, because your audience isn't going to be able to move forward. You're not making that any easier for them. And again, you're denying the direction that the country clearly wants to be taken in. Just because you lost and they don't agree with you doesn't mean everyone's bad and you're this morally superior, virtuous person and everybody ought to be scared because you're scared. It's stupid. And despite 45% of women voting for Trump, here's Al Sharpton trying to tell you that blacks and Latinos are actually misogynists. That's why Kamala didn't win. Watch.
Yes, there's misogyny. But it's not just misogyny from white men. Mm-hmm. It's misogyny from Hispanic men.
Right.
It's misogyny from black men.
We've got to be honest. Among Hispanic men and black men, there's a lot of misogyny. And I think that we've got to deal with the reality that he appealed to this whole false macho thing that some black men and some Latino men went for.
The problem with this way of thinking that exposes the actual hate and absence of substance from the Democrats is that they look at everything through their own lens, meaning they've voted for the past 8 years based off of we hate Trump, we don't like Trump. And so they only think of things as a movement against someone. Trump's movement was anti-Kamala because their movements are all anti-Trump. They don't understand that people think favorably of politicians. Typically, usually, that's how it ought to go. We support this politician, not we're voting for them because we really don't like the other one. And that's the only lens that they see things through. So they see all this support for Trump and they assume it comes from their lens of they must be voting for Trump because it's an anti-Kamala vote. No, all these votes were pro-Trump. They were supporting. We have a candidate that we actually rally behind, genuinely enjoy, and support. So that's why they can't believe that it's anything other than some form of bigotry. Whether it's racism or it's misogyny, it has to be some form of hate. That's the way that they're justifying this and seeing it and understanding it. And it's completely ridiculous, and it just shows how lost these people are. I think it's going to be a while before the Dems pick up any real support, both in Congress and with another presidential candidate. But you guys let me know what you think in the comments section below. I hope you're thrilled about Trump's victory. I cannot wait for these next 4 years. I'm ready for things to get back on track finally. Make sure you guys like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next one.